Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. Nancy Pelosi and her fellow liberals in Congress announced the official articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. I'll explain to you exactly why they're trying to impeach him and what it's all over in just a moment. Up next, the Horowitz report is also out, and James Comey and the left are, celebrating way too soon. More than anything, the report showed where the FBI fell short, and I'll give you those facts in just a moment. And finally, the speed of this impeachment is truly unprecedented based on historical standards. The liberals in Congress are trying to get this through the Senate before Christmas. And they're also trying to attempt to distract the American people with the passage of a trade deal that they set on for more than a year. But first, before we get to that, a quick reminder. Please share this video with your friends on social media. Your AMAC Weekly News starts right now. The attempted coup by the Democrats is now a very real threat to our democracy. Nancy Pelosi took no time at all with her announcement of the official articles of impeachment against President Trump. First, let me point out that this comes only 78 days after her initial announcement that they would be pursuing impeachment. That means this is shorter than the impeachment process of Johnson, Nixon, and Clinton. In the past, Congress has taken more time and actually provided the president with more rights than President Trump ever received. Now, what is even more embarrassing is after weeks of claiming that Donald Trump bribed the Ukrainian government, they didn't even charge President Trump with that offense. Now, liberals are stuck with two articles. That's right, just two. Both of which are completely ridiculous. One is abuse of power, and the other is obstruction of Congress, which basically means that Congress couldn't get what they wanted when they wanted it. Now, Pelosi appeared before the press and all of America to announce how, quote, solemn she is that they are having to put these articles forward. Take a look at this from Fox News.
On this solemn day, I recall that the first order of business for members of Congress is the solemn act to take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. There's great respect and gratitude that I thank the chairs of the committees, the 6 committees who have been working to help us honor our oath of office.
Now, that was awfully short for Nancy Pelosi, a woman that literally talks all the time. And that is all she had to say? That should tell you everything you need to know about the lack of evidence that they have to support this impeachment. Now, I love how she acts as though she hasn't been dreaming of this moment since the second the president won the election in 2016. Now, Pelosi then yielded the microphone over to Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff. First, listen to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, as he announces the official articles of impeachment.
Over the last several months, the investigative committees of the House have been engaged in an impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump's efforts to solicit foreign interference in the 2020 elections, efforts that compromised our national security and threatened the integrity of our elections. Today, in service to our duty to the Constitution and to our country, the House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, with committing high crimes and misdemeanors. The first article is for abuse of power. It is an impeachable offense for the President to exercise the powers of his public office to obtain an improper personal benefit while ignoring or injuring the national interest. And when he was caught, when the House investigated and opened an impeachment inquiry, President Trump engaged in unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance of the impeachment inquiry. This gives rise to the second article of impeachment for obstruction of Congress.
So you see, they couldn't get Donald Trump on obstruction of justice because there weren't enough liberals that would actually vote in favor of that particular article of impeachment. So instead, they literally made up their own and called it obstruction of Congress. Now, when Adam Schiff had his chance to speak to the American people, he made it very clear that this has nothing to do with the will of the American people and everything to do with, well, making sure Americans would have no chance to vote for President Trump in 2020. Watch this from the same announcement that aired on Fox News.
Now, some would argue, why don't you just wait? Why don't you just wait until you get these witnesses the White House refuses to produce? Why don't you just wait until you get the documents the White House refuses to turn over? And people should understand what that argument really means. It has taken us 8 months to get a lower court ruling that Don McGahn has no absolute right to defy Congress. 8 months for one court decision. If it takes us another 8 months to get a second court or maybe a Supreme Court decision, people need to understand that is not the end of the process. The argument, why don't you just wait, amounts to this. Why don't you just let him cheat in one more election? Why not let him cheat just one more time? Why not let him have foreign help just one more time? That is what that argument amounts to. The president's misconduct goes to the heart of whether we can conduct a free and fair election in 2020.
Now, what Schiff actually means by that is that the election cannot be free and fair if the American people get to choose who they actually want for the presidency. That idea terrifies them so much that they are willing to take down a duly elected president who has done nothing wrong in order to make sure that he doesn't even get a chance to get reelected by the American people in a free election. Now, the most revealing part of this announcement is that they didn't even stick around to answer any questions from a media that's already on their side. Representative Doug Collins made it very clear that the liberals didn't want to face the facts of what they did because they literally had no explanation for the articles of impeachment. Listen to what Collins had to say in an interview on Fox News right after the announcement.
It's very telling that they all walked off stage and didn't answer a question. That, to me, is really telling. Why would the Speaker of the House, you just announced articles of impeachment. You had your 5 committee chairs. You had Adam Schiff. You had Jerry Nadler. And they wouldn't take questions? I mean, that tells me that they're really not inherently comfortable with what they're doing, and I think this is the problem that we have. Adam Schiff has heard his own voice for so long, he simply believes what he's saying without any evidence of truth or any evidence of facts here. They simply want to get the clock in the calendar because they are so obsessed and so fearful that President Trump is going to win again next November that they don't even perceive the problems that they have.
So what you have is 7 Democrats standing on stage to introduce 2 articles of impeachment over 8 meaningless lines in a phone call. Also, all of this is to overturn the votes of 63 million Americans in 2016 because they're afraid they can't win in 2020. This isn't just a partisan sham. This is a coup attempt. Now, it's time for us to fight back, and we here at AMAC need your help to make sure that your vote in the last election isn't erased, and we also need to make sure that your vote in the future election of 2020 actually matters. Well, if the Democrats get their way, they've made it clear Donald Trump's name won't even be on the ballot. So we got to make sure that we put massive pressure on the Senate to make sure they do not allow this coup to continue. We will be asking for your help in doing this in the weeks and days ahead. So as liberals try to distract the American people with this impeachment coup attempt, the DOJ's Horowitz report was actually released this past week. This nearly 500-page report reflected Inspector General Michael Horowitz's investigation that began all the way back in March of 2018. It was to investigate how the Russian hoax investigation was even started. Now, there is a big problem that resulted from the reports released. Now, even though liberals are trying to focus in on the contested points of whether or not the motives of James Comey and Andrew McCabe were political in nature, the true focus should be on the fact that the report showed 17 significant errors of admission in the Carter Page FISA application. This allowed the Obama administration to literally spy on then presidential candidate Donald Trump's campaign. Now, before James Comey could even read this massive report, he had already inked an op-ed saying the report vindicated the actions of his FBI. Well, just days later, Horowitz testified before Congress that nobody, not even Comey, is vindicated by this report. Take a look at this back and forth on C-SPAN.
The former FBI Director James Comey said this week that your report vindicates him. Is that a fair assessment of your report?
I think the activities we found here don't vindicate anybody who touched this.
Okay. This is what Comey said in 2018. I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed, that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI. I think the notion that FISA was abused here is nonsense. Would it be fair to say that you take issue with that statement?
Certainly our findings were that there were significant problems.
So when Comey speaks about FISA, you shouldn't listen. You should listen to Mr. Horowitz. He's not vindicated, and to be concerned about the FISA warrant process is not nonsense.
Also, Representative John Radcliffe pointed out the massive omission errors in this Fox News interview with Bret Baier. Take a look.
Even if there was a basis to open it, everything that came after it was exculpatory. There was no reason to continue it. And the second part of this that's really important is when they got to the stage of a FISA application in October, as you see in here, this report is just completely full of what the Inspector General politely says are errors and omissions. Another way of saying that are lies, misrepresentations, false statements, and the failure to turn over exculpatory information.
Is that what strikes you?
Now, this was never a victory for the left or for James Comey because it was a lie from the very beginning. Basically, there are 4 key findings of this new report. Investigators had bias against Trump. The feds used a confidential human source against the campaign, a.k.a. an actual spy. And the CHS recordings didn't back collusion. And on top of that, the fake and uncorroborated dossier that started all of this was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. Well, guess what? That was totally admitted on purpose by the FBI. They did not disclose to the FISA court who paid for the dossier that they were justifying using it to actually spy on Donald Trump. Now, what is even worse is that the president's campaign never even received any notice whatsoever that any of this was going on. Now, one of the biggest challengers of the results of this report has been none other than the Attorney General, Bill Barr. Not only does the Attorney General continue to make it clear that the Trump campaign was clearly spied upon, but he also says that the Horowitz report is far from telling the full story. Barr says that Durham's report that is going to be coming out soon enough is far more encompassing and goes way deeper than the Horowitz report that was released this past week. Now, the report by the U.S. Attorney John Durham, which has not been released at this time, is not limited in the same ways that the Horowitz report was, because it can go further than the existing DOJ or FBI officials were able to go. Now, Barr said in an NBC interview that Durham's report will address things that the Investigator General's report wasn't even able to do. Take a look.
Durham is looking at the whole waterfront. He is looking at the issue of how it got started. He's looking at whether or not the narrative of Trump being involved in the Russian interference actually preceded July and wasn't, in fact, the precipitating trigger for the investigation. He's also looking at the conduct of the investigation. There are some things that were done in the investigation that are not included in Horowitz's report, and he's looking at those things. But also, a few weeks ago, I told him that he should spend just as much attention on the post-election period. And I did that because of some of the stuff that Horowitz has uncovered, which to me is inexplicable. Inexplicable.
Now, one very important aspect of all of this that everybody needs to understand is that Horowitz himself has not even made his decision on the question of improper motive. Now, what we do know is that the FBI did launch this Russia probe based on flimsy evidence, which is why the unverified Steele dossier was used for the FISA warrant. And again, they purposely did not disclose who paid for the Steele dossier because the FBI knew that the FISA court would never allow the warrant to be granted if the information was disclosed to the court. Now, Barr explained this in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that aired on Fox News. Take a look.
Remember, they say, okay, we're not going to go and talk to the campaign. We're going to send people in, wire them up, and have them talk to the individuals. That happened. That happened in August, September, and October, and it all came back exculpatory. They never informed the court. They were told they didn't have probable cause to get a warrant, and so they took the Steele dossier, which they had done nothing to verify, and they used that to get the warrant.
What we do know about the Horowitz report is this. It leaves a lot more questions for people around the Obama administration at the FBI and the DOJ than actual answers about the Russia hoax, and that is exactly why we will keep you up to date, as a lot more information is going to be coming out on this very soon. There is a major story this week that has been underreported on by the media. It is the story of the speed at which Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are pursuing this impeachment, and it is historically, literally unprecedented. Now, let me remind you that it only took 78 days after Pelosi's initial announcement that they would be pursuing impeachment to get to where we are now. For Andrew Johnson, the entire process took 94 days, and there were 11 articles of impeachment. Now, for Nixon, the entire process took 184 days, and there were 3 articles of impeachment: obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. Now, for Clinton, the entire process took 127 days, and 2 articles of perjury and obstruction of justice. Now, in the past, Congress has taken more time and also provided the president with significant legal rights to defend themselves than Donald Trump ever received. So why is Nancy Pelosi pushing at this, lightning speed? It's actually very simple and extremely telling. Pelosi is terrified that many more Democrats are going to defect and not vote to impeach if they are allowed to go home over the Christmas break and actually hear from their constituents. CNN legal analyst Ross Garber called BS on Schiff's claim that if they don't do the impeachment now, then somehow they won't have time to do it before the 2020 elections. Take a look.
The Democrats, are moving these articles through. They know it has little or no shot of going anywhere in the Senate. And as you probably remember, for weeks or months, I've been saying, look, take a look at the actual issues here, do a real investigation. And this notion by Schiff that he didn't have time to go to court, I think is just nonsense. One of the reasons why the McGahn case has taken 8 months to play out is that the House didn't go to court right away. They issued the subpoena. They waited a long time to try to enforce it. They waited a long time to try to go to court. And so instead, we do have this rushed impeachment process, which is looking like a, fast train to acquittal in the Senate.
Look, you got to give it to Nancy Pelosi. I don't agree with her politics, but she is a smart political operative. Pelosi knows the extreme left has pushed her and her colleagues down a road that is a dead end, and it was a big mistake. And that is why, literally within 30 minutes after she laid out the articles of impeachment, she then announced a trade deal that she had been sitting on for over a year. She knows the American people are not buying what they're selling when it comes to impeachment. Now, Pelosi knew her members were going to get hit when they got home for doing nothing but impeachment over the last 3 years. Another problem for Nancy Pelosi is Donald Trump has been out there talking to the American people, reminding them of this amazing trade agreement, and that it has been sitting there in Congress waiting on the Democrats to move on it. The same agreement they're trying to take credit for now, they tabled it for more than a year. Now, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, this agreement is historic, which is exactly now what Nancy Pelosi is telling the American people. But rather than do this when it was first agreed upon between the 3 countries, Pelosi literally decided to wait until right after she announced the articles of impeachment against the president and tried to use that moment to get out of jail, well, at least with the American workers. What is even more shocking is the media is allowing her to get away with this, trying to give her credit for a deal that she purposely did not do for more than a year. Take a look at Nancy Pelosi in her own words.
This is a day we've all been working to and working for on the path to yes. We were in range for a while, but until we could cross a certain threshold of enforcement, for our workers' rights, for environment, and for the prescription drug issue. As you know, they were three of the areas that we had put out there. There is no question, of course, that this trade agreement is much better than NAFTA. But in terms of our work here, it is infinitely better than what was initially proposed by the administration. It's a victory for America's workers. It's one that we take great pride in advancing.
Now, the story that the media should have covered is the fact that she didn't even thank Donald Trump for all of his work to get this deal done. In fact, she was trying to put down the president's work that he did to accomplish an amazing trade agreement that she said was going to be a disaster. Then again, you're dealing with a woman that wants you now to give her credit for a bill that she purposely did not do anything on, sat on it for an entire year. And then she announced that it was going to take place less than 30 minutes after she announced articles of impeachment. Now, this goes back to a bigger point. If Nancy Pelosi actually thought that impeachment was a good idea, then she would have been on the podium announcing to all the news stations why the American people should be in support of impeachment. The reality is that she knew she needed to tell the American people that they'd done something, anything else over the last 3 years other than trying to impeach Donald Trump. Now, President Trump took part in a rally in Pennsylvania and hit back hard at the coup attempt in the left and called them out for them trying to take credit for a trade deal that not only did he get done, but they purposely did not enact for more than a year. Take a look at this at his rally.
And the reason they announced it on the same day, 1 hour later, they announced impeachment. A few guys standing behind her. They announced impeachment. And then an hour later, she announced that she's going to do USMCA. You know why? It's a huge deal. And it plays down the impeachment because they're embarrassed by the impeachment. And our poll numbers have gone through the roof because of her stupid impeachment.
Now, this fight is far from over, but we will continue at AMAC to give you the info you need to defend President Trump from this coup attempt. That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. Be sure to hit the share button right now on Facebook and Twitter. Also, a quick reminder, if you haven't joined AMAC or renewed your AMAC membership, do it now so you can continue to receive this show and also stand and protect the President of the United States of America. You'll also get our AMAC magazine, which is filled with important information about what's going on in Washington. AMAC represents you and now more than 2 million other conservatives on Capitol Hill every day. So make sure you join or renew right now. I'm Ben Ferguson. I'll see you back next week for our next episode.